to the workshop this morning on the local alcohol policy. Before we get underway, could I ask Councillor Maxwell if you could open our workshop with a karakia, please?
Certainly. Thank you. Hei noi tātou, let us pray. Kia tau anō, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou ariki aihu kraiti. Me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki ta wairua tapu ai ake tōnu atu. Amen. May the grace of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us now and evermore. Amen. Kia ora koutou.
Tēnā koe, Councillor Maxwell, for that. So good morning, everyone. This workshop is being live streamed. I do have an apology from Councillor Wang, and I'd like to welcome our presenters this morning. So we've got Greg, Alex, and is Kurt going to present as well? No? Well, moral support, that's fine. So we're in your hands. We've got a number of slides to get through this morning, and the first thing is that Greg will just provide a bit of scene setting for where we've come to, and for this, because it is a workshop, we're going to just seek some directions from Council as to whether or not they're comfortable with the recommendation that the staff propose, given that this is going out for public consultation. So, Greg, we're in your hands.
Morning, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for the opportunity this morning just to present our progress so far and where we've got to on this local alcohol policy review. We have a number of slides to run through today, so we'll breeze through them pretty quickly. These are in your stellar as well for you to follow. So the purpose of today's workshop is to update you on the review since our last meeting on this topic, present impacts of the local alcohol nationally and in Rotorua, discuss policy options for a new LAP, including our preferred options from our research and perspective, and then lead to a statement of proposal being formed for adoption on the 26th of February. Just to provide a bit of context, there's a number of policy options and opportunities that we have across this area. You would have seen this slide before, and a number of policies that we're working on that can impact certain areas and harm and all that stuff across the areas, especially in JP's area. From a timeline perspective, so we've done a lot of work meeting with key stakeholders and in the development of a proposed or draft local alcohol policy. At the moment, we've received all of our supporting evidence and information and busy drafting preferred options at the moment. So following today's workshop, we'll be putting together a statement of proposal that'll come to Council at the end of February for hopefully adoption and then go out for consultation over March and then leading to the adoption of a local alcohol policy in May. What we want to cover today is just a recap of the review, what the national picture is on alcohol, and then what our local context is as well. And then really wanting to spend quite a bit of time on, or most of today, on the policy options and have a discussion around where we've landed on those. So just a quick recap on the local alcohol policy. It's a set of decisions made by yourselves in consultation with the community about the sale and supply of alcohol in our geographical area. The LOP's objective is to ensure that the sale, supply and consumption of alcohol occurs safely and responsibly, and alcohol-related harm is minimized. An LOP should reflect community preferences and will influence the DLC decisions on licensing applications. So what has happened since our last workshop? There's been a large number of stakeholder engagements with key members of the community and key community groups in development of the proposals. The data received, that we've got some legislated data that is required from the New Zealand Police and from the Medical Officer of Health, which we've received, but there's also some additional data from NZTA and from St John's as well that we've received. And there's also been a 2-week-long survey, which I know a lot of you are aware of, that we've run across the community to gain a Rotorua snapshot of the context of alcohol. So what is the national picture on alcohol? Just wanting to explain that this is a massive, as you're aware, this is a massive industry. There's growers, manufacturers, retailers, there's a huge hospitality sector. It contributes almost $2 billion to GDP. generates just over 2 billion in exports, predominantly wine, and creates 31,000 jobs directly. And if you include hospitality jobs, it's almost 200,000 jobs across, or just on 200,000 jobs across the country. We've got a national survey that we've looked at to give us the national context, and 76% of adults consumed alcohol in the past year. That's a slight downward trend from 2013. Of these adults, 20% were identified as hazardous drinkers. Over 10% drink heavily, so 6+ drinks once a week. 25% drink heavily at least once a month. And all of these percentages are higher for men, Maori and Pacifica. Just a sort of a quick overview of what the trends are across this. So you're seeing a slight reduction in I think that's beer, but heading more towards a sophisticated drinking experience. So including craft beers, premium wines, that sort of thing, cocktail culture, and as well as non-alcoholic drinks. There has been a decline in beer, wine, and spirits in 22-23. Look, we know there's key alcohol harms such as crime, disorder, mental health, and so on. A recent study found alcohol is the most harmful drug for the total population and your youth compared to other drugs. The Ministry of Health estimates the cost of alcohol harm to be just over $9 billion, with the key areas around road crashes, which is about 2 billion, intimate partner violence, and child maltreatment. From a local context, tourism is a large employer to our economy, as we all know. Food and beverage services and retail sales are a significant source of our tourism spend at around about $180 million annually, of which just over 50 million is on the food and beverage industry. Large sporting, arts and cultural events are hosted every year, bringing in revenue. And to continue attracting businesses, people and events, we need a flourishing accommodation, food and beverage entertainment scene, as you're all aware. Our socio-demographic profile, so we are in a high deprivation area, and we've got the 2023 census data to substantiate that. One of the highest crime rates in New Zealand. The population size is around 78,000, with approximately 10% increase in the last 10 years. We've got a young population compared to the rest of New Zealand, and we've got a high Maori population of 43% against the average of 16. So that's just a quick snapshot of our current licensed premises. Obviously, the special licenses will vary depending on what's happening in any given time. And then just wanting to highlight that Rotorua has just recently set a national record for the number of objections to a single alcohol licensed premises. And that is as recent as, I think, in the last month or two. So just getting into some of the evidence base. So we've got some police data that we've tried to put into a more succinct couple of slides for you. Those are the areas that we requested, which is predominantly the urban area in Ngataha. And this was asked for the last 2 years, so September 2022 to August 2024. And we asked for specific types of data as well. What we got from that is that the police recorded just over 4,500 alcohol-related harms in the last 2 years. Around 45% of that was related to family harm. Most alcohol harm happens in people's homes, and but there is a large proportion that happens in public as well. Saturday is the most prevalent for that to happen, as well as December. So that's just a quick overview of sort of what's happening across the district, where you can see it's really centered around the CBD and Rotorua urban area. Just quickly running through some of the graphs and slides that we received from them. So traffic offences is the highest, followed by incidents and violence, and then tapering off across drugs and antisocial behaviour and dishonesty, etc. This is a pretty significant bell curve that shows the time of the day at which this is occurring, and you can see that a lot of the harm is happening between 8 p.m. and 3 a.m. in the morning. That's what the police are telling us. And that's also showing us that Saturday is the highest by quite a long way of when that is occurring. the month of the year being December, as you can imagine, being a very busy time in our city, as well as the weather, playing ball, and all these other things. Sorry, I am breezing through this pretty quickly, but these are on Stella for you as well. From a health data context, we've received this health data from the Health New Zealand. This is around the hospital admissions that are wholly attributable to alcohol. So it does not include injuries or cancers where alcohol is partially attributable, and emergency department presentations. So those are the two sets of data that we've received from them. So what this is really showing is when the data is presented is when a patient's primary or secondary diagnosis is wholly attributed to alcohol. So wholly attributable conditions can include long-term diseases such as alcohol liver, fetal alcohol syndrome, etc., or acute, such as alcohol poisoning and ethanol poisoning. The results presented are primarily driven by long-term chronic use of alcohol. And Rotorua has a much higher hospital admission rate due to alcohol than the national average. And on the graph on the right, you can see that Rotorua is that sort of triangled line, and the national average is the more stable line that runs at the bottom. So this map shows where patients are domiciled, and it doesn't have to be that they went to the hospital in Rotorua. They could have gone to a hospital in another district, but this is their home address. And this is showing that it's largely concentrated in our inner city and east side and Ngataha. For the Rotorua Hospital, between the years 2021 to 2023, the ED admissions due to alcohol contributed to 1 to 2.5% of total attendances. Just wanting to note, though, that just under half of all admissions say that alcohol is not known instead of no, it wasn't there, so that they weren't 100% sure whether it was a contributor or not. And this is just showing the times of the day at which those emergency department peaks are at, and we're seeing it pretty much from 11 o'clock at night until around about 1 a.m. So that really does align pretty consistently with our police data. And then this is also showing that it's happening across Saturdays and Sundays being our peaks. From an ED department admissions, once again showing that our inner city is where people are domiciled that attend the ED. So once again, substantiating our police data. We ran a community survey for a number of weeks. We had a huge response. We had just over 600 responses to this survey, which is pretty large in itself. 94% of people agreed or strongly agreed that hospitality is an important part of our industry, of our tourism in Rotorua. Only 43% of people agreed or strongly agreed that most people drink responsibly. More people have had a drink in the past year in this sample compared to the national average. And the sample of residents are more likely to drink heavily than the national average. Over 75% of those that completed the survey had witnessed public disorder behaviour. So there's a common feedback received from the survey, and that is that there are too many bottle stores in Rotorua.
Just at that point, maybe I know we're going to get on to the policy discussion shortly, so just to give you a chance to have a breather, are there any questions just relating to this background information? There was also dropped into Stella a significant report from the police and from Ministry of Health, but are there any questions for Greg and the team on these slides as the background information before we get into the policy discussion? Councillor Kiriopa?
Thanks. I just had one question. You said that less alcohol has been available since 2013, but didn't explain why or what that meant on one of your earlier slides.
I think it was the slide was referring to that since 2013 there has been a downward trend in people drinking alcohol. So that's just from the data presented nationally, and I think those reasons could be due to health reasons or economic reasons, but I'm not entirely sure.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Your trend data is up till 2023, is that right? I don't know whether you can get more up to date, because I think the last 6 months there's been quite a shift in the types of alcohol consumed and how much is being consumed. So I wonder if you could, I don't know that it would shift the policy, but there's a change. I just wonder what the outcome of the 750 plus objections were and what was the main objection. I imagine it's a bottle store somewhere. I don't know. I don't need to know the details, but what's the guts of the objections?
Thank you. So just speaking to the objections part, so that is actually still a licence which is currently in process. So I can't go into too much detail on that, other than the main sort of spirit of the objections is around the proliferation of bottle stores and the harm if that's not appropriately managed.
Okay, I'd imagine that was the case. And the other question I've got is, inside the data you've got traffic as a statistic, but I imagine that's police conducting breathalyzer tests and most of those around the CBD. So I wonder whether that skews the data towards the CBD when actually perhaps we should be looking at harm type offences without the traffic. Does that make sense? Because I think that data sort of says to me, well, perhaps someone who isn't thinking about things, that the problem exists in the CBD, but in actual fact it's where the police conduct their breathalyzer testing.
I think you're right, Councillor Brown. I think that is obviously where things are more concentrated. I think the substantiating side of that would be the health data, though, and where people are domiciled and where if there is harm happening, where they're actually living, which is kind of showing us that it's in the CBD as well.
Just wonder whether that's right, because there's not that many people living in the CBD, so I wonder whether there's something skewing the data there. What I'm just think we need to be a little bit careful on what is when the finger's been pointed at the CBD. I think we just need to be careful about what's going on there. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
In the police data provided, it goes into drink driving offences, which covers the whole of the district. So you can see where the police are stopping people, and it is certainly centred around the CBD, but it is happening all over the district as well.
Sure.
But so I can highlight that to you after the meeting as well.
Oh, well, I'm sure it'll come out in the other reports. Thank you. That's all I had, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Good morning. The first question that I have, and it was really wonderful to see how many stakeholders have already been engaged with, but I do wonder if there was any youth engagement that was part of this. Obviously, although the drinking age for purchasing is 18, we still do have a lot of youth drinking issues, and also we do have the Rotorua Youth Council that may be able to assist with this. So as part of the consultation period, is there a possibility that we could make sure at some stage youth voices being fed into this as well?
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. Yes, of course. We will be engaging with the Youth Council to assist us through the consultation period. There has been quite extensive conversations with the Youth Centre, not necessarily the youth themselves at this stage, though.
Thank you very much for that, and I do acknowledge you have already engaged with many people. The other question that I had was just regarding the crime rate. So you did note in one of the slides that unfortunately Rotorua has one of the highest crime rates, but much of this is also just due to petty crime, or our retailers, the big ones such as Kmart or Warehouse, having theft issues. Are we also in any data or evidence that you have the highest crime rates specifically related to alcohol, or is that just a general statement?
So that was a general statement into a relation to crime. In terms of alcohol, so we asked police NZ if they could provide data on alcohol harm and how that compares to different regions in New Zealand, but they're unable to provide that data because they said that, they're just unable to do that at this time.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Patterson, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you very much for the presentation to date. One thing I noticed is the why seems to be missing. Why are we drinking so much? what drives people to do that? Is it purely because they're suffering through the cost of living crisis, that there are problems at home that they can't resolve peaceably because they're under some stress, that people are in fear of where they live, so they stay home and drink excessively? Treating the why would probably be an interesting part of any policy of going forward. Why is this happening? It should be dovetailed. I'm concerned if we forget about the why and just say this is the data and that's how we're going to respond, we're not going to fix the actual problems. It's only one part of it. Alcohol just adds fuel to the fire. So maybe we need to figure out a way of dosing that fire down a bit. Thank you.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you for the presentation. Can I ask, I was looking for the name up there, do you get information and consultation talking with the taxi industry? They seem to be out as those crucial times, Saturday night and the time you're getting the information from the police, but I'm sure taxis would have a really good idea. If there are responsible people being taken home by them. Yeah, good question.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. No, so we have not engaged with them as yet, but that's a really good suggestion and we'll take that away. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. So Greg, we'll let you carry on then with the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next part of this presentation is really where we were hoping to spend most of our time today and discuss what policy options could be available to us based on evidence, based on other policies around the country, based on conversations with the police, with the medical officer of health, and with key stakeholders and consultants like Grant Hewison, who has been helping us through this process. Just a quick recap on this. So under the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act 2012, the local alcohol policy can contain provisions on the location of licensed premises, location by proximity to sensitive sites, whether further licenses should be issued, maximum trading hours, one-way door restrictions, discretionary conditions for licenses. Different provisions can apply for on, off, club and special licenses. So we have 4 kinds of alcohol licenses. You've got the on licenses, and this is where the licensee can sell and supply alcohol for consumption on site. Common on license examples include cafes, hotels, taverns, caterers, restaurants, bring your own alcohol restaurants. Off licenses, so the licensee can sell alcohol for consumption elsewhere. Common off license examples would include bottle stores and supermarkets. And then there's club licenses. The licensee can sell and supply alcohol only to authorized customers who are members or visitors of that club for consumption there. And special licenses, and these are issued to allow for the sale and consumption of alcohol at events or occasions on premises that are unlicensed, or premises for which the event timing would be outside of their normal license conditions. So just wanting to outlay how we will tackle this discussion, I guess. We'll be working through them in the different categories, and we'll start with the off licenses. And we'll be looking at density or proliferation, trading hours, discretionary conditions, and sensitive sites. These are the areas that we've put our effort in based on the data that we've received. Obviously, that for areas that are not listed there, our recommendation is that that stays the same. But these are really the areas that we feel can make the most impact. Off-license policy options around density. So that's just a quick snapshot of where our premises are across the district, mainly concentrated in our urban area, as you would expect. We have 56 off-licensed premises at the moment. There's no restrictions under the number or location, except for a new off-license cannot be within 200 meters of a school or marae. Rotorua is seeing an increase in community participation in off-license objections, as we had alluded to earlier. So that is quite small. This is in Stella, but this is effectively our 4 policy options that we've developed. So option 1 is to keep things the same. there's no restrictions on the number of off licenses. Policy option number 2 is our recommended option, which is a temporary freeze for 3 years on off licenses and then a presumption against granting that license thereafter. Option number 3 is a permanent freeze indefinitely. And then option number 4 is a permanent freeze in deprivation 9 and 10 areas. So just wanting to talk a little bit to option number 2. So what that would mean is that there would be no off licenses for 3 years and a presumption against new license applications thereafter, with special consideration for new supermarkets or grocery stores. And that is a nod to the growth that could happen across our district in that space. The difference between that and number 3 is that number 3 would be a permanent freeze for the next 6 years until we go through another review. The reason why we're saying 3 years as a temporary freeze and then a presumption against afterwards, this follows a number of other local alcohol policies across the country that are doing something similar. We've gone for 3 years because that is halfway through our next review and will allow us enough data to understand what that could look like going forward. I'm happy to stop there and have any questions if anybody has any.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to talk to option 4, Greg, or not, with the density?
Sorry. So this is a quick map of our deprivation 9 and 10 areas across our area. And as you can see, 9 and 10 make up quite a large portion of our inner city where most of the off licenses are. And so if we had to go with that option, that would pretty much limit across most of our urban area anyway. And so we feel that the temporary freeze is probably the most logical way to go in this space.
Okay, Rob, if you could just take the slide back, thank you. So, councillors, we're just seeking some direction here. The staff are proposing option 2. Are there any questions to Greg and the team around the proposed option that they've suggested? Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would the licences be transferable within a freeze, or is it a sinking lid effectively?
Yes, yeah. So, we know it's quite common practice for a business to sell to another off licence, so it's the owners change, but the premise still remains the same. So they would be unaffected by this. It's just if a brand new store was going to open.
If someone wanted to shift location, would they be allowed to carry their licence to a new location under this?
I don't think so, no. I think we can flesh that out, but as I understand, it wouldn't be the case, because that would be the off-licence move-in premise into a new neighbourhood, which we don't want to happen under this option.
Because I think that's what's available to the pokey machines, isn't it? Correct me, I'm not in that space, but I think that's how it understands. You can shift a pokey licence to a new location. Yeah, so I'm just getting some of that detail. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, had you considered a blend of option 2 and option 4 so that the highest deprivation areas no more, ever? But the others, the 3-year moratorium, I guess you could say, a freeze?
Thank you, Councillor. I guess that's what this discussion is for. So there is an opportunity to do that. If you so wish, we could explore that.
Thank you.
I will just add, I think that opens up certain risks, though, that off licences can open in neighbouring areas. So if you look at the CBD and we look at the 9 and 10 deprivation areas, they do border lower deprivation areas. So there's, what's to stop someone just crossing the street to go to the new off licence?
What I was getting at is you've got option 2 as a 3-year freeze on all, but make it permanent for the high deprivation areas.
Perhaps, Rob, if you just flick to the next slide and we'll just have a look at those high deprivation areas, because I'm not sure if that would be problematic given it's pretty much the whole map. Don't know, perhaps, Greg, could you just perhaps talk through the slide a little bit more? It might be easier. It's
Sorry.
There is a slide deck in Stella. It's a second slide deck that's been dropped in. It's on the lower line on the Stella. This is a slightly condensed slide deck.
Yeah, so what we're seeing here is the 9 and 10 deprivation being predominantly in the CBD and the urban areas that surround that. We're seeing the lower sort of deprivation out towards Pukehangi area, as well as the Linmore and the east side area, but along the lakeside all the way through CBD and through Western Heights and that area we're seeing high deprivation, and that's actually where the highest concentration of licenses are.
Councillor O'Brien, you had a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair, thank you guys for your presentations. So could I just ask the options 2 to 4, special consideration for new supermarkets and grocery stores. So we're saying no new off licences, but effectively alcohol, if the supermarket opens, there'll be off licence sales anyway, assuming a grocery store or a supermarket. So what's the actual benefit of allowing that to happen? I mean, alcohol is alcohol, isn't it? If you want a drink, you're not really bothered about whether it comes from a supermarket or for a...
That is correct. I think that's just giving a nod to the opportunity of growth if we do hit that. I think supermarkets in general have very, very strict processes around the selling of alcohol, and it's also not their main source of sales. Yes, agree, alcohol is alcohol, and people can buy from there, but there's a lot more manager and staff ratio to people in the store, and they, through conversations with them as well, understanding their processes, they are very, very tight, and taking risks in that area is not worth it for them. So that is there for consideration for the DLC. It does not mean that it would be granted. It is just that the DLC would have an opportunity to consider that application. It's not a permanent freeze against everything.
For sure, but sorry, the point I'm trying to make is, if you're saying that alcohol consumption, whether it comes from this store or that store, is bad, so for a SOP towards growth, so that we can get some development contribution or whatever, we're prepared to have it come from a Foursquare or a supermarket chain. Fair enough. Alcohol doesn't matter where it comes from, is correct?
Yep, that's correct. Yep.
So I don't really understand why you would say, let's stop alcohol sales in these areas, but if it's under this brand, that's okay.
Yep.
It sort of defeats the whole purpose of what the evidence you're putting in front of us, does it not?
A little bit. I guess the supermarkets also have different sort of conditions about what they can and can't sell, and there's no hard liquor and spirits. They can sell certain things. Yes, agree, alcohol is alcohol.
But they sell beer.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. So really that's probably what we're trying to seek from you, if that's palatable or not.
I think we'll come back to that.
Thank you.
So I get your point there, Councillor O'Brien. I'll just take the rest of the questions and then we can come back and have just a little bit of a round room discussion about the proposed recommendation. So Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. I think option 2 is a really good balance. The question I have is probably connected to Councillor O'Brien's, where I was just wondering what size constitutes a supermarket or grocery store, because you can get some places like Foursquares that are very small, and if we restrict it for the next 3 years, which I do support, do we run the risk of, and I know it's special consideration, so it's not guaranteed, we will consider it, but do we run the risk of just seeing smaller grocery stores but half of their sales are alcohol, as an example?
Sorry, yes, generally it is size, and I'm happy to flick through some further information on how that's determined, if that's helpful to the committee.
Oh, that's fine. I just wanted to check that size was considered. Thank you. And just finally, regarding the off-licence, and don't worry if this is out of scope, but often in the higher deprivation areas, such as Fordlands, there are some very entrepreneurial locals that know how to brew their own alcohol, and they do so, and unfortunately also sell that as well. Is there also collaboration or partnership with the police to assist in monitoring that if they do become aware that especially the spirits that are being homebrewed are also being sold. I just think we need to be real that harm doesn't only just come from the responsible people that are selling. Harm also comes from people in the community that have no licence, that, you know, there's no health and safety guarantees in anything they're producing, but we do have locals that are consuming it.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. That is quite a difficult one, so definitely the inspectorate and the police do have an eye on our licensed premises annually, but things outside of that comes down to the question about whether they're known and filter through to the police, but certainly I would guarantee that if those types of sellers did become known there to council / the police medical officer of health, then it would be followed up.
Okay, any further questions, councillors, on this? Otherwise, just trying to get a sense of whether or not, by and large, option 2 is the preferred option. Remembering this is just a consultation document going out. There's still an opportunity for the public to make submissions on this, but we do have to go out with some options and a preferred one. So, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair. Could I ask, you know how we've had, if we signal a rise in development contribution, suddenly we get a plethora of applications come in to beat the rises. So if we talk about this and we put this out for a preferred, forgive me, when were we talking about adopting a?
We're looking at May.
May. Is there not a risk that we'll just see a plethora of applications pour in for people who may or may not consider? Because once the application comes in, it will be under existing, our current law and also our bylaws and policy. Is that correct?
Just wondering, Greg, is there a microphone at the back that might make it a little bit easier for the presenters to answer questions?
I can hear you. But
It is difficult to predict, I guess, any new applications coming in. Best we could probably do is provide some stats around how those have grown in the last couple of years. But yes, it is reasonable to expect that somebody at some stage may put in an application.
well, it would pay to if we're going to ban it, or prohibit it, if the policy goes through as is, it would make sense now to put one in if you're thinking about it, isn't it? Because otherwise I won't be able to. So.
Yes, and I guess that's the guidance that's being sought from you all.
Okay, thank you.
I guess we can consider how we handle any new applications. So currently there'll be applications in the systems that haven't been granted. So we can take that away and have a look into it. I think Auckland, in their case, any application that wasn't granted, so they might have been lodged but not necessarily reviewed by the tri-agencies, in which case when the new LAP came into effect, those applications didn't come into fruition, so we can take a similar approach as well. So any new applications, potentially we can leave those.
Thank you. Just so we're clear, I'm just asking around, so if someone's watching this right now and says, holy heck, these guys could be banning new off licences, I'd be applying tomorrow if I wanted to do one, because I'd want to get the application in under our current policy. And it would be heard under this current policy, what the laws and bylaws that we have now. Is that correct? Because there'd be, otherwise, if you're sort of saying, well, we'll hold it over till the new rules come in, that would raise some questions of natural justice for me.
Any new applications will be subject to the new LAP, so once it's granted and the DLC. But let's take that away because we're going to come back in 2 weeks' time to go through the statement of proposal and we can answer that fully.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Questions now from Councillor Patterson, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, just going back to the data that you presented before regarding the statistics on alcohol harm, that yes, these either criminal or presentations at hospitals was due to a contributing factor was the consumption of alcohol. Did we have any information about the type of alcohol that led to that? Was it, well, we know that Cody's and things like that, the high strength Woodstock and bourbons, you know, the stuff that you can only buy from off licenses and not supermarkets. Is there a correlation between the sales from off licenses and the sales from supermarkets? Can we see the difference between the two?
So we have anecdotal information from those locally, so the police, Safe City Guardians, the youth centre, that the type of alcohol that these people are drinking, and it tends to be the alcohol that you can buy from bottle shops, so your Cody's, those sorts of things. Although that's not to say beer doesn't contribute to harm, but yeah, that's what we've heard.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just taking on board what Councillor O'Brien is suggesting might happen, how much weighting goes on community feedback towards granting a licence, as an example of the 750?
Thank you. So certainly, so you may be aware there were some changes which was called the Community Participation Amendment Act, August 2023. Those changes, the whole purpose for that was to essentially let the community become more involved in decision making. That has widened the scope of who can object to an alcohol licence, and has really placed a expectation on councils to make the process, I guess, more widely known. So if, and importantly, that scope has gone from somebody having to prove they've got a greater interest than the public generally, to anyone can object to a licence. So when an objection is received, that basically triggers a move towards a hearing for the DLC to hear that application, and as part of that, whoever has objected certainly has the opportunity to come and speak, and the DLC, as they do, will consider all parties' input, including the public's, in making their decision.
Okay, I think just trying to round off this discussion, so I'm not sure, Councillor O'Brien, if we can necessarily foreshadow whether or not any applications are going to be made, and given what Kurt's just mentioned, that it still has a process to go through with the DLC. If we looked at those options, there are two parts to it. It's no new off licences, and the second part is around the special consideration for supermarkets. If by and large our council is comfortable that there are no new off licences for 3 years, with a presumption against new applications thereafter, by and large, is there any violent objection to that at this stage?
Sorry, Madam Chair. As may have indicated, I'm not sure about this, because already we're saying we're contradicting the actual intent of the policy by saying, well, we're going to ban, a suggestion to prohibit new off licences. But if it's under this brand of supermarket or this brand of grocery store, we may allow alcohol. Well, that defeats the whole purpose of no new...
I'm just taking the first line, so I'm not talking about the supermarkets, I'm just taking the first line of the recommendation, which is around no new off licences for 3 years and a presumption thereafter, as the proposed option. I'll come back to the supermarket part of it, because it seemed to me that there were some questions from councillors around that. So I'm just trying to see, is there a general feeling that in terms of, the first one is no restrictions, so effectively it just carries on as we are. The third one is a permanent freeze, so no more, full stop. And 4 is a permanent freeze in those high deprivation areas, and we've just heard the concerns about what could happen in that situation.
So what actual evidence are we basing it on that off licences are the main contributors? I mean, forgive me, but as Councillor Brown raised before, if a police stop is on, say, Ford Road, chances are everyone who gets caught drink driving will be on Ford Road, because that's where the operation is. There's no link as to where the actual drinking or period of intoxication was. Personally, for myself, I have a much bigger concern over young people drinking RTDs at home far cheaper, buying them cheap from local suppliers, taking them home, becoming intoxicated, then heading into town or higher density areas where trouble occurs. So I just wonder what evidence we're looking at the option of no off licences. What's the evidence in front of us? Alcohol consumption, yes, but what evidence has been?
So I think the staff have already tried to present some information before. We've got the data from the police and from the Ministry of Health.
Yes, about alcohol.
Remembering today we are not making a decision. All we're trying to do is to provide some options to the community for them to be consulted about. And we need to, so all of the options will go out, but we need to go out in the way in which the consultation document is put out is with a preferred option so that people can be directed to kind of focus on that. But they're obviously entitled to comment on all the other options and all the wider general things that you've raised. But we're going to go through all the different aspects of density and then trading hours, and then we'll talk about on licences as well. So I think, as I said, we're not making a decision here. We're just trying to see if there is general consensus that this is probably the best of the preferred options to go out with.
I thank you, and you're doing a great job as chair, but again, I just make the point, I'm not here to pay lip service to something just to put it out in front of the public. I'm interested in solutions that we put forward that can actually help fix the problems and address the concerns, not just coming up with airy-fairy things that we can say, well, here's an option for the public, we've done our bit, put in. But thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Well, Councillor O'Brien, if you have another suggestion, then happy to take that, but the staff have come up with 4 proposed options. They've outlined the benefits of each of the options as they see it and the risks to each of the options, and they've outlined, as you've mentioned, what key evidence they've used to come up with these proposed options. So unless you have some other suggestion that you think that we could consider, I'll take comments from other councillors. So Councillor Kiriopa.
Thank you. I've just got one question. The definition of sensitive sites, is that school and marae? What's the definition of a sensitive site?
We're going to come to that. So
currently our local alcohol policy has a definition of sensitive site, which includes schools and marae. Yeah, so that's
just
what
only those two.
Only those two. So I think schools it says education facilities, so it's a bit broader. So it
and what would it take?
Schools.
What would it take for a community, a deprived community? I hate that word, but a deprived community of at 9 or 10, which I'm guessing is from the New Zealand Index of Deprivation, showing the poorest communities in the country. What would it take for a deprived community to be able to get onto the sensitive site, to be recognised as a sensitive site?
That would be a policy option from you. So if that sensitive site is part of our local alcohol policy, you have the opportunity to add that in if you so wish.
Can that be an option that could go out to the public?
We're coming to that shortly, so I think we're just getting a little bit ahead of ourselves in terms of the presentation.
All right,
so
no, that's all right. I haven't finished, if that's all right. The second thing is, my preferred option is in support of what Councillor Patterson proposed, except I would support a mixed option of 3 and 4, a last resort option of 2 and 4. Iwi leaders have been actively sharing information to our communities to support whānau and happy to oppose new applications. And I have to say that current council processes are really unhelpful in relation to consents involving the sale of alcohol, because the relevant information that people need to consider is not readily upfront in the information that's sent out in terms of letters that are sent to communities. If you want to know what the consent is actually asking for example, if it's a change or widening of alcohol sale hours, you'll get a letter in the mail, but you'll need to actively go out and request further details to understand what's actually been applied for before you can consider the impacts on communities. So we've had iwi leaders who have actively been coming back to council saying, well, so what's happening, to then be able to share that information, and then we've had a great uptake from people, and I'm pretty sure that the increased objections that you've identified will be from our deprive 9 and 10 communities because it's iwi in those, and they've been actively trying to support our communities. So, you know, for me, option 2 is just pussyfooting around the issues. I support going out to the community and saying, let's do something about it. If the community comes back and says, hell no, we want as much alcohol and we'll make our own decisions, which I'm sure some people will say, then you can go back to option 2, but start that being the starting point. When our communities are, you've seen the stats, that being the starting point is just not acceptable for me.
Okay, thank you. So I've noted that 3 and 4 for Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, through you. I know that this is an issue that means a lot to this council and also to our community because of the negative impacts that it does have. I do acknowledge there's some really strong feelings within our councillors, but I do also acknowledge that they may be misdirected towards our staff who have done an incredible job meeting with a number of various stakeholders across our community and collating significant amount of evidence to present to us today. So I am very grateful for the presentation and the 4 options that you've given us. Today's an opportunity for us to be able to provide that direction of what the preferred option is for consultation. I mentioned in my questions, and I am a supporter of option 2. I think it is fair. 6 years is a long time to have nothing, and at least after 3 years that can be reviewed again. At that stage, if our population is not grown, if we have not continued to see the significant growth of new neighbourhoods in our communities, then perhaps we could continue the freeze at that stage. But the reality is we want Rotorua to continue to grow in all of the positive ways, and we do also want our community to have communities that have access to all of their needs. While we're discussing alcohol harm at the moment, there are also positive things that come from the celebratory and also communal benefits of being able to finish a hard day's work and have a drink with your family and friends in a safe way, which most of our community do. So I would be supportive of option 2. I think it is a good balance, but is still a pretty hard approach of no new off-licence premises in the next 3 years.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to reiterate my suggestion before. I'd prefer to see a blend of option 2 and 4. If you take a drive around those areas, all of the shopping centres are already in place. We're not going to see any more shopping centres built in those 9 and 10 deprivation areas. There is no room to go adding more liquor outlets. They're there.
Okay.
We don't need any more. So if we put a moratorium on that area but allow growth options in the other areas, obviously if people want it, they're just going to drive somewhere to get it. But at least it makes a statement and makes it harder to get.
Okay, councillors, I'm just mindful we've still got quite a lot to go through, so I'm just wondering how's going to be the easiest way to get some consensus? I can go around the room and you can indicate a preferred option and we see where the numbers kind of land. Remembering this is still just a consultation document, otherwise I'm not sure, given that we are only about halfway through the directions that we need to give to the staff. So I've heard a 3 and 4, a 2 and a 4 and a 2, so...
Madam Chair, just a question. When we go out for consultation, will all 4 of these options
Yes,
will be available? I would support option 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kiriopa?
Sorry, I didn't mention that the special circumstances for supermarkets is not palatable within option 2. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Maxwell, Councillor Brown, Councillor Lee. Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pretty comfortable with what I've heard from the staff. It's only a proposal at this stage. I'll be more guided by the feedback from the public consultation. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. Councillor Brown?
2 and 4 with no supermarkets. No to supermarkets.
So there seems to be... So it's an option 2 seems to be the general consensus, but without the supermarket. So by and large, remembering no decision here, we're just trying to find a recommended option. So option 2, take out the line around special consideration for new supermarkets. Oh, I'm just trying to get the numbers, so by and large, I think there's more people that have suggested option. I'm not trying to push it to a particular option, I'm just looking at where the numbers are falling. It's pretty difficult for me here because we're in a workshop situation where we're just trying to get a sense of the direction, and remembering this does have to go out for consultation, and as Councillor Lee has mentioned, this will be an opportunity for the public to comment on all of those options, but unfortunately the way in which we have to put the consultation document out is that Council has to go out with a preferred option. So if we can soften that by removing the supermarkets, which I seem to hear is of some concern, people can still come back with the suggestions that you've made, like 2 and 4 or 2 and 3 or whatever the other blend of the recommendations are.
How many are actually just saying 2? If majority are saying 2 and 4 or 2 and 3, can we be realistic about that too, please?
Okay, Councillor, Mayor Tapsell.
That's okay. I appreciate that Councillor Kaifong is only reflecting back what she's hearing. So I was one that recommended just option 2, and my questions, it addressed what I think the main concern for people is of not having the special consideration, and is that the size will also be considered in that. So it won't be a small 4 square on a corner, but it may be a brand new countdown out east side with all of the development that's happening. As one, sorry, I don't think it's called that anymore, Woolworths, as one example. But I'm happy to go out with consultation with that completely removed if councillors still feel that a large grocery store could not have it. So I thought that that was already addressed in the response to my question, because I do see where you're coming from as well, which was my concern. The thing we have to be mindful of is we don't want to cause any unnecessary concern, because if there's no consideration, and then we will get very likely, because we have in the past almost always, the supermarkets will come to us and say, why am I not allowed to put in a supermarket? So I just, for the benefit of our staff in the consultation document, I think we just need to be very clear on what we want, and this is the opportunity for discussion, and also quite clear on when we're talking about part of option 4, are there, I'm not sure if it'd be helpful, are there specific areas, because the map there are quite, we have a significant amount of our district that is deprivation 9 and 10. Are there specific areas that you just want to mention, or that we could mention, for example, Fordlands, Western Heights, etc., that you don't want anymore, where there already is a proliferation? Or are we just asking for a broad, not in the deprivation areas? Because currently it's just by map.
How are we going to choose which of the 9
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, my feedback on that was because there may be some areas that have a proliferation already of liquor stores and are not expecting to see any more housing growth. I think we just need to be careful about sort of doing a one-size-fits-all or painting a broad brush on this policy, where there might also be unintended consequences. So yes, we should target where there is currently or is likely to be harm, but I don't want to unnecessarily restrict other areas that may be okay. So I was really just asking through you, Madam Chair, whether the councillors that are supporting option 4 have specific areas that they would like to see absolute zero, or are we okay with just the map area of deprivation 9 and 10, which is a significant amount of our district? So I'm happy as a supporter of option 2 to also include some part of option 4, but would also just seek some feedback on what the councillors who would like option 4 specifically want to achieve with that I think it'll be helpful on the staff in making sure that the consultation document reflects what the direction of councillors are, if that's okay.
Okay, so I'm just are these questions or are they comments? So I'm just, a question from Councillor Kiriopa?
Obviously option 1 is not an option, no one's interested in it. Can we remove that and I'll have a 4th option to be that combined option 2 and 4, so that you can keep options 2, 3, 4 as they are, but have the 4th option being the no new off licences plus a permanent freeze on the deprivation 9 and 10 areas. And surely the document, this is my second question, will the document too, if you're going to be talking about 9 and 10 areas, highlight the problem areas, which are the deprivation 9 and 10, and which of those has a proliferation of alcohol stores, including supermarkets?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we will have a map in our consultation document, statement of proposal. I think, Madam Chair, what I'm hearing is we'll keep option 1 in there as an option for the community to consider as well. But what I'm hearing from Councillor Kiriopa, Madam Chair, is that we have a 5th option, which would be a temporary freeze with a presumption against thereafter, with a permanent freeze on deprivation 9 and 10. I think what we're seeking today is that the preferred option, or is option 2 the preferred option?
I think just let me just get clarification. I think what Councillor Kiriopa is suggesting is an option 5, which is a hybrid of option 2 and option 4. The only bit that hasn't been confirmed around that is the supermarket. So am I taking it that if it's a combination of 2 and 4, then it's the no new off licences for 3 years and a presumption against, but also a permanent freeze in deprivation areas 9 and 10. So is that the option 5 that councillors are suggesting is the recommended option? Getting a few nods.
May I ask a question? So in order to simplify it and not go out with too many options, and again I thank staff for putting this forward as a starting point. So obviously no one liked option 1 and no one liked option 3. Could we remove both of those so it's just, and then we renumber them, option 2, option 4, option 2 plus 4, so that we're only going out with 3 options and not confusing the fact? And I'm sure within the feedback, if some people want to keep the same, they'll provide it. And you know, I'm presuming that's okay to go out. You don't need to provide all that. Okay, great. Perhaps that could be a suggestion.
Thank you. That's a good suggestion, Mayor Tapsell. Okay, so I think we've given enough feedback to the staff on this one. So, Greg, I think we'll move on now to the off-licence trading hours. So I'm sure this will also create some discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So coming into our current off-licence trading hours, currently off-licences are allowed to sell between 7 and 10:15 in the evening. However, not all licences are granted these hours, and the default national trading hours are from 7 until 11. What we've got up there is a number of options again. One is to keep it the same. Number 2, which is recommended, is an earlier closing time, so from 7 o'clock until 9 p.m, and this will impact approximately 40 stores. The option 3 is a later opening time, so moving it from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. That'll impact approximately 25 stores. And then delivery hours. This is recommended as part of all the options that have a earlier closing time, as there's a bit of a loophole around deliveries where they can deliver until a later time. And so what we're wanting to do is align the deliveries to the actual closing time of the off licenses. So that one just aligns like for like. I think I'll leave it there, Madam Chair.
Okay, I'll take questions then to the staff on that. Was there an option considered to combine 2 and 3, so it's a 9 till 9?
Yes, sorry, I think the next slide actually shows some of the data. So what we're seeing in the evening is that bell curve of where harm actually, what time harm actually occurs, and that's post 9, post 10 p.m. there is actually quite little harm happening early in the morning. And so we see that the later hours are really where, reducing the closing time hours is where we would probably get the most impact.
Okay, questions, councillors? Councillor Brown?
What's the justification for having liquor available at 7 to 9 a.m. in the morning? What's the feedback on that?
I think we chose to go with a earlier closing time because that's where most of the harm is happening. So as well, through our community survey, most people aren't buying alcohol this early in the morning. I should say that, so these hours are the trading hours, but most of the stores don't actually open until later on. So if you think of bottle stores, they actually don't really open until 9 and 10 a.m. In the morning. So we just felt that the most harm that could be reduced is by having earlier closing times.
Sure, I understand that. I just wasn't sure why we permit 7 till 9 a.m. in the morning, or why they want it, why grocery stores want it, I guess.
Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair. Could I ask, so would the later hours of, say, 9 a.m, that would make sense to me because I don't particularly want kids being able to see people, shall we say, walking out with boxes and boxes or with a shopping trolley load full. Would 9 till 9 be something that we could look at? I wonder if that, Madam Chair, wouldn't be something we could perhaps, as an option, put out. Sorry, it's not up there, but...
No, that's what I was asking before, is to combine 2
because it's still 12 hours of trading. Not everyone will want to be open at 9, but for those that feel, at least then, school children may not be quite as
Yes.
susceptible to visible.
Okay, I'll get some other questions and then we'll see whether that seems to be a good compromise with the options that are available here. Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think in answer to Councillor Brown's query, the obvious reason why you would have a liquor licence opening at 7 is because supermarkets open at 7, and it would be pretty difficult, I'd imagine, for a supermarket to organise for somebody to be able to go in the morning, get an urgent bag of coffee, and then be unable to buy a bottle of wine for that evening at the same time.
Okay, any other thoughts around the trading hours? Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just echoing some of the comments, this was a debate that was done recently in Tauranga, and quite a few of the, I was listening to ZB, I think, and quite a number of the callers were saying, well, I do my shopping in the morning. You know, I'm not an alcoholic, I just buy my alcohol at the same time that I do all my other shopping, and it would be very inconvenient for me to have to go back. So that was their arguments, and I kind of see where they're coming from. I used to do that when I was taking my wife to work. I'd go straight and do the shopping, and that'd be that done for the day, tick that box. And I never saw, how would you put it, people who were stocking up to start drinking as soon as they bought and out of the door. I never really saw that type. You can see that type. I never saw them then because they're probably still asleep. But anyway, that's just my thoughts.
Okay, so you're suggesting option 2. Any other comments, councillors? Councillor Maxwell?
Just the preference for 9, just consistency.
Any other comments,
Not too early, not too late.
So we've got a 9 till 9 and a 7 till 9, so... Councillor Barker?
I think option 2, the earlier closing, definitely addresses some of those impacts of harm that occur in that time of night. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Kiriopa.
And just adding on to what Councillor Barker's just said, the delivery hours also.
Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair, could I ask our presenters, was any consideration given to closing over school times? So, say, between 2:30, 4 o'clock, for example?
Thank you. Yes, so we did look into this, but I think the disruption to business would be too great if we closed during the day. I can say that other councils across the country do not do this. They focus at the beginning of the day or the end of the day.
Okay, so forgive me, so the key evidence you've put up there, children's exposure, which explains the later opening of 9 a.m, but we're still going to allow exposure later on in the day. On one hand, we're saying here's evidence, we're trying to reduce children's exposure, so we're using that as evidence for the 9 o'clock start, but then we're not doing anything about them walking past after school. Okay, all good, thank you.
I think, sorry, Councillor O'Brien, yes, so that does become very difficult from a trading perspective, but that is not our recommended option that we've put forward. Our recommended option is the closing times, but we're happy to work through that if that is what you so wish as well.
No, I'm just, again, you've put evidence up there, so I wonder how evidence fits on one side but not on something. But thank you for answering. Thank you.
Councillor Brown?
I'm happy with the recommended.
Okay, so there just seems to be general consensus, remembering once again, just an option to go out for consultation. So if we take option 2 with the delivery hours being aligned to option 2, by and large, councillors, thank you. I'm getting some nods around the table. Okay, thank you. Moving on now, Greg, to the discretionary conditions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, off-licence discretionary conditions. Currently, we have SIP-TED principles that are applied. Alcohol product advertising is limited to 50% of the shop front, and then additional conditions can be added by the DLC. So, what we're looking at proposing here is that we have option 1, which is keep everything the same, but our recommended option is to adopt additional conditions. So keep the current existing conditions, but also adopt additional conditions that are mandatory provisions, so some mandatory provisions as well as some considerations for the DLC. The mandatory provisions are around our social responsibility policy, which is including staff training, etc. And then additional considerations would be around CCTV, SIP-TED, effective lighting, etc., that the DLC can consider. So I'd like to leave that there if that's okay.
Thank you. Any questions to the team on this one? Seems to be a sensible option. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair. Folks, could I ask, so if we have all these, if we leave it up to the DLC to make additional changes, who's going to monitor this? Because, forgive me, because I go past a number of off licences most days and I see graffiti, which has been there long term. I see broken shops, I see broken windows, I see terrible looking shop fronts. I see signs out advertising specials, etc. like that, often at very cheap prices. Now, if we're not monitoring what we've got now, if we add on to the burden to our staff, what guarantees do we have that we can actually follow up and make sure that these guidelines are actually followed?
Thank you, Councillor. So yes, that obligation does lie with the agency, so predominantly our inspectorate, also assisted by the police, so they would certainly be the ones following up. We are looking at how we can get tighter in that space, but aside from the scheduled inspections of premises, given that there is the whole district to get around, any information like that through to the inspectorate is very handy so that they can prioritise those premises.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do we have tools that might affect advertising in media, social media? Can we bring in laws around that or not?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think this will just be around the premise itself. Yeah, regardless. So if they can do what they like on their social media, as I understand, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, just regarding that same topic, could you clarify what no advertising of alcohol on store or any chattels means specifically?
Yes, so this is just to, I guess, encompass anything that can be advertised. So a lot of off licenses and on licenses will sell or promote alcohol on things outside their store. So if we said no advertising on their store, then they might get a car in, for example, with, I don't know, bottles on it. And it's just to ensure that it's kind of a broader definition to encompass anything else that could have alcohol in it.
So what's the point of that? I mean, if they can advertise their specials in the newspaper, on the radio, on the television, if they've got big enough budgets, what's the point of doing that?
I suppose, marketing by its very nature is to attract people. So this is talking about the amenity and good order of a place as well. So it's to limit the marketing and, I guess, attractiveness of these stores for our community here and now.
Any other questions, councillors? Is there any general disagreement with the recommendation, which is the additional conditions, which obviously the DLC would consider at the time? No, there seems to be general consensus around that, thank you. Sensitive sites?
Thank you. Moving on to sensitive sites. Our current policy has no new off licences can open within 200 metres of a school or marae. This is quite a limited definition and does not apply to renewals. What we have is our current option 1, which is keep it the same, but then a option 2, which is a plus option. So keep it the same as the requirements above, but also require new applications to engage with selected premises within 200 metres of the store boundary to boundary. So that could include places of worship, residential areas, youth centres, etc. That is currently not a requirement. So this would basically ensure that every person who applies for a new off licence would be communicating with people, stores, residential, lots, whoever, that lives within a 200-metre radius of them, to make them aware of what's happening.
Okay, thank you. So questions? I think Councillor Kiriopa, you have a question?
No, I just 100% support that
Thank you.
recommendation.
I think once again this is a sensible option. Getting nods around the table for that one. So unless there's any further comments or questions, we'll take that as the preferred option. Just wondering, Councillor O'Brien.
Sorry, could I just ask, places of worship, is that a recognised church, or is it going to be anywhere where a group of 6 people get together and say we're a prayer group? How are we going to refine, how are we going to identify a...
So I think what we're saying there is that this, the main policy option here is that you have to engage with everybody within the 200 metres, and that will include everybody who is falling into that circumference, whether that's a place of worship, a residential area, youth centre, hospital, doesn't matter. Everybody within the 200 metres would be caught up in that.
Wow.
Okay, thank you. I'm just wondering, we've still got to do all of the on-licence policy options. Councillors, I wonder if we just take a short break here and get a cup of coffee and a toilet break, and then we resume at 11 o'clock. Thank you. Okay, councillors, welcome back. So we'll move on now to the on-licence policy options. So Greg, in your hands again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just looking at some of our on-licence policy options, specifically starting with trading hours. Our current on-licences are allowed to sell alcohol between 8 a.m. and 3 a.m. the following day in the inner city, and then outside the inner city is 8 to 1 a.m. the following day. So not all licences are granted these opening hours. That's at the discretion of the DLC. But the default national trading hours are between 8 a.m. and 4 a.m. the following day. Policy options that we're putting in front of you today, option 1 is to keep it the same. Option 2, which is recommended, is an earlier closing time. So max trading hours in the inner city would become 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. the following day, and in the outside of the inner city, in the CBD, would be an 8 to 1 a.m. With added conditions if trading after 1 a.m., and this would impact approximately 24 stores. Option 3 is the same as option 2, except that Eat Street is closed at 1 a.m., and this will approximately impact 5 premises. And then option 4 is an earlier closing time across all premises in the inner city and outer city from 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. the following day. Happy to take any questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Greg. I've just got a question. You've got police key askers for premises to close by 1. Is that for inner and outer, or is it just?
Sorry, so the police have been have asked us for the 1 a.m. close, and obviously we're taking a holistic approach in conversations with all stakeholders across. That is showing the alcohol harm time. This is across all alcohol harm, not only for on licences.
Okay, thank you. So questions to the team. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just go back to that slide. What are the red lines supposed to represent on the graph?
Sorry, that is just showing the time frame of where this policy option would impact.
Right, okay, thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? So Councillor Maxwell.
Can I ask, you said it's gone back to 1, what time was it before?
Councillor Maxwell, the current trading hours are 8 a.m. to 3 a.m. the following day in the inner city, and 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. outside the inner city. That's the current trading hours.
So that's what's showing in option 1, Councillor Maxwell. So the proposed is to actually bring it forward, so we're closing earlier in the inner city by an hour, if that's the recommendation, and there would be no change to the outside of the inner city. So Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, just with regards to option 2, how many actual real nightclubs have we got? Not just bars that have a late licence, but a proper nightclub. I don't know of any.
Thank you, Councillor. So I don't think we have many nightclubs themselves. We do have premises that act like a nightclub in terms of like the social club, some places on Eat Street as well, which are the main premises. So even though it says here there are 24 premises impacted, so that's they can trade until 3 a.m, but those that are actually open till 3 a.m. is far fewer, more like a handful currently.
So do we have a specific, I guess you could say, criteria or category that sets out if you want a nightclub licence, you have to do A, B, C, D to be qualified as a nightclub?
So the legislation differentiates between different premises. So if you're a Class 1 restaurant or a Class 2, Class 3, and that's basically whether you have a bar and how often it's used as a bar. So if you're a restaurant or a cafe, you're a lower risk premise, and then you're subject to different fees as well. So the legislation kind of categorises that already.
Because what I'm concerned about is cutting off our noses to spite our face. You know, we're trying to rebuild Rotorua as a major tourism centre, and we don't have any of those kind of facilities anymore. We've only got wannabes who are trying hard to be that, but they aren't actually. If someone wanted to come in and set up a decent operation here, this would stop them from doing that. So I'm just wondering if there's any option to have some kind of designated criteria that if you meet these conditions, then you are able to apply for let's say a 3 o'clock closing.
So we could have an option, so to keep the same hours until 3 a.m, but have stricter conditions on those who operate after 1 a.m. I suppose the key feedback that we've had from the police is about community safety, and currently what it's like out in these premises at night time, and there are lots of fights, and that's why we've recommended 2 a.m. as a balanced approach. 2 a.m. is quite late for people already. Appreciate it's not 3 a.m, but it's a balance of protecting the community as well as having options for people at night.
I'm all for community safety, don't get me wrong. What I'm concerned about is people who come from overseas who are used to their kind of world. Spain, they don't go to dinner till 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night. That's just the way they live. So they come here and it's all closed, and they're surprised. And I know we've got to look after our people first, but again, I say we need to be careful that we're not shutting down options for the future, because things will improve. This city will get back on its feet, and we do need to have a nighttime economy. It's better than what we've got now.
I would just like to say that this policy, we can review it at any time. So the policy is on a 6-year cycle. However, if the police feedback, we can monitor this halfway and see how progress is, if harm is being reduced, and look at the police data. And if that's found, then we can, extend the hours again. So this is, just for now, I suppose.
Okay, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to follow on from Councillor Patterson, I wonder if we're not actually trying to fix a problem which doesn't exist. The trading hours of being open till 3 o'clock in the following day, how many premises that actually have that are actually open past midnight? I mean, I'm sorry, unless I'm going to the wrong places, and now that I've hit my mid-40s, I'm probably not visiting some of the places Councillor Patterson does, or the young ones. But I mean, I'm going down each street, and I find it hard to see a place open after 10 o'clock, let alone midnight, let alone 3 a.m. And I take it under the current conditions, who can afford staffing going till 3 o'clock in the morning, how quiet our nightlife is after 10 o'clock. So, sorry, I just sort of wonder, and return each street to a dining precinct? Well, again, sorry, what actual restaurant is a nightclub there at the moment? I know a couple have bans, but we're not going to say we'll start banning bans, are we? So, forgive me, I don't really see the point of what's been put up here. I appreciate its options, but in terms of practicality, I think we're trying to fix something that don't exist as far as I'm concerned, but happy to hear from others. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just make the observation that the police are, of course, entitled to their opinion and entitled to make submissions, but they don't have a right of veto over what we do. So just leave it there.
Okay, Councillor Kiriopa.
I support what Councillor Patterson's saying. Our rangatahi deserve somewhere to go, and obviously tourists. But I think you find but there is a problem with fighting, with young people fighting at that time of the morning. And as a parent of young men, it is a serious problem, because our kids are getting hurt. With people deliberately going out to look for fights at that time of night. So I'm not sure whether or not, I would say that on each street there's only 2 or 3 places that will stay open past midnight, and we need those in the city until such time as the city starts to look better at that time of night. But so I support option 2 to see if it makes a difference in terms of what the police are seeing at that time of night. But this is probably not the answer to addressing those actual issues that are occurring, but let's see if it does make a difference.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I think it's up there in small print, but I'm trying to catch it. But so there's still an option for venues or places to apply for extension from 1 o'clock if, like, say, we try and be an event city as well. If an event like Lakeside or something like that finishes at 10:30, 11 o'clock, by the time they get to a place, it's 1 o'clock. So there is opportunity to apply for special licenses to stay on. And how long does that take to get that license?
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Madam Chair. Yes, so certainly even now people can apply for special licences, etc. if they've got an event. So that is the crux there. It's not just normal sort of operating after that time. For special events, they have to be in minimum of 20 working days ahead of the event, unless it's a large event with over 400 people, which is a different time frame around that.
I also mean, like, sports events now are being held in the evenings. Lights are up and done, and by the time some of them leave there, they'd like to go to a good place in town, and there's time to apply for, but you need 20 days, did you say?
Yes, that's right, and I think that's something that we've seen from our DLC, is that those types of events are generally known quite a long while in advance, so there is an expectation on the applicant that they get ahead of the game, so to speak.
Thank you.
Councillor Maxwell, did you have a preference in terms of those, given that you can get a special licence if it's extended? So are you suggesting option 2, but if there's a special event, they go and get another licence? Is that where you're suggesting? Okay. Thank you. Councillor Brown, did you have a question?
Noise compliant data in each street, or is that supposed to be noise complaint? Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Sure, thank you, Councillor. So the noise, it is about noise complaints and recognising that in some areas of town we do have neighbouring motels and residential areas that do from time to time attract complaints if not managed appropriately.
Don't we have noise bylaws that should provide the solution for that?
Correct. The question within that is, I guess, within the licensing regime, whether there's an expectation that people are addressing that in their licence application and taking those measures up front rather than putting them in place as a result of a complaint.
So I feel like what we're trying to do with each street is actually demonstrates how hard it is to get people to comply with the noise bylaws, and people on the street will make noise, but it's not coming from a premise necessarily. I would just say, from my personal experience, a long time in the liquor industry, and this is where I've got a bit of a conflict of interest, and I've been in it longer than anyone except the fine-looking gentleman at the back of the room there. Nothing good happens after 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. My student children will say exactly that. You should be tucked up in bed by 2 o'clock. And when we did open for a while, when Grumpy Mole, the Pig and Whistle, was under a bit of pressure, we thought we'd try opening a bit later because we close at 1:30. We were open till 2:30 and people start fighting at 2, in my experience. And what Councillor Kiriopa is saying, when the Lava Bar was open, it was a fight every night, I think, just about. So it's a balancing act. We're not going to improve our reputation if we're beating up the international tourists at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I think it's a compromise. I don't know that we'll ever be a party destination like Spain or Europe or wherever you're thinking, because of the social issues we've got in town. Because there are young men out there looking to come and beat up the tourist at 2 o'clock in the morning because they're easy targets. So I think it's a compromise, but long story short, I'm happy with the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one subsequent question leading on from Councillor Maxwell's question regarding events and sports activities. For example, Rugby World Cup in somewhere like South Africa or the United Kingdom, their games are televised live at 3 o'clock in the morning. So if a particular bar said, right, you want to come and join the atmosphere, instead of sitting at home on your chair, you want to go into a party atmosphere, is that still possible?
Yes, it is. So Rugby World Cup is slightly different because the government made its own legislative provisions around that. However, yes, if there are games of some other sort, then an existing on licence can certainly apply for a special licence to operate outside of their normal hours and put in place the appropriate procedures and processes.
Thank you.
I think Councillor Barker, you're the only one that perhaps hasn't indicated. I've kind of just been keeping a little bit of a running tally, and it seems to be, so if I could just get...
Sure, just after listening to all that, I think option 2 is my preference. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair. Folks, could I ask, was there any thought about perhaps do we need to identify a particular licence as per a nightclub? So if someone's specifically applying for a nightclub, maybe we should be saying to them, hey, under the district plan, your insulation standards need to be higher. You need to do more work than a normal bar on noise reduction, say after 11 p.m, etc. like that. In terms of, say, our administration side, is that something you considered, and did you think about, or could you tell us about why or not?
Yes, thank you, Councillor O'Brien. So on the conditions, we kind of specifically highlight those premises which are more high risk, which is categorised under the legislation, and kind of giving guidance to the DLC to add more conditions on their licence to kind of manage those premises.
Okay, so councillors, I've had a 1 later, 2, option 1. I know that Mayor Tapsell and myself both support option 2, so once again, I think option 2 would be the preferred option to go out for consultation. So moving on now to the on-licence discretionary conditions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the current discretionary conditions for an on-licence are SIPTED principles, host responsibility policy, so what are the transport options, food available and availability of low and no alcohol drinks, and then additional conditions are added by the DLC on a case-by-case basis. What we are proposing here is, well, first option is to keep it the same. What our recommended option is to adopt additional conditions. So mandatory provisions would be the host responsibility policy, which is already there, and this will include, staff training and delivery, etc., and maintenance of an alcohol-related incidents book, and signage on transport, not serving minors, and all those kind of things. Consideration by the DLC based on size, risk, and compliance would be additional SIPTED principles: CCTV, lighting, layout, security after a certain time, patron to security ratio, patron to duty manager ratio, one-way door restrictions, and so on. And that would be the discretion of the DLC to implement those as they see fit per premise. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions, councillors, on this one? It's the signage on transport, that's like your taxi home, is it? Your bus, free bus or something? Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just reading what's up on our, in our boards and what's up on the screen behind you, where we're saying, so security, CCTV, etc. like that, so that'll be basically compulsory? So sorry, if I'm applying for a licence for a bar or something like that, and you're saying that the current ones are too vague, how are you saying you would like it put into a more firmer position?
So by adding it to the LAP, the District Licensing Committee has to have regard to our local alcohol policy, so it gives them more basis on to add conditions. So obviously a new premise or renewals, each premise will be different, and the DLC will have to decide on a case-by-case basis based on compliance, risk, what conditions they feel are appropriate for that premise. So by adding these to the local alcohol policy, the DLC can have, can consider these, and will have, yeah, they'll be able to consider these with greater reasoning, I suppose.
So forgive me, so if you're saying, if one of our issues is the vagueness of the current standard, if we're just saying, well, the DLC can now just do what they want, they're an open book, doesn't that actually put us at risk? Because how are they going, where's the equilibrium? I mean, for me, you would either say all new places have CCTV or you don't. Okay, how is a bar in one location, why am I at risk by opening a bar here, but down the road they don't have to comply and pay for a CCTV system? If that was a condition, I'm just using cameras as a...
So currently the DLC can add any conditions that they like. So they are already going above and beyond what's in the local alcohol policy. So as mentioned, we have the vague SIPTED principles and the host responsibility policy. So the DLC are already doing these sorts of things. So this is just kind of more formalising this into the LAP. And each premise, as I just mentioned, have different risk profiles. If you're a cafe but you sell alcohol, should you be subject to have CCTV as opposed to a nightclub or those staying until 3 a.m, which is why the DLC can consider this all on a case-by-case basis.
I suppose where I'm struggling is, on one hand we're saying, well, the DSE can do it now, and they are doing it, you've just said, so why change it? What is it we're actually trying to do here? If they already have the powers to do what you're saying, on one hand you're saying it's vague, but they're doing it. On the other hand, you say we want to now formalise it so they can do it more.
This is just to support the DLC in their decision-making ability. So if it's in the LAP, the DLC have to have regard to it. So if you're a licence owner, you can, I suppose, argue on your conditions that the DLC impose. If it's in the local alcohol policy, then the DLC have greater reasoning to impose these conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just like some clarification on the line restrictions on outdoor seating. So what does that mean? Is that if you're going to open a new bar, then that'll be looked at, because currently some of the new, more popular bars that we have established outdoor seating areas. Are they now going to have to become more compliant, or what is that about, please?
Yeah, exactly. So that's all about addressing noise from outside. So, if there's like smoking areas near premises which are near residential areas. So the DLC can consider compliance, whether there has been any noise complaints from these areas. And on that basis, they can decide whether that outside seating area might need to close earlier on than the trading hours, say an hour before, for example, or after midnight, everything has to be inside, those sorts of things.
So just to clarify, for existing bars that have been there for a long time, even though they may have changed hands a few times, but they've still been there for many years, that new residents who move into an area that was not previously residential, do they get preferential treatment above the bar that's been there before they were even living in that area?
So, as I mentioned, this will be based on compliance, risk, those sorts of things. So if that bar is breaching the noise levels, so there are permitted levels of noise allowed, and if they're breaching those levels, then the DLC can consider that when the bar is up for renewal and the impacts on residents.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
I think Councillor Patterson's trying to articulate the concerns that I have. You've got an existing bylaw around noise, but you're going to use the sledgehammer, the liquor licensing laws, to smash the owners, because we can't enforce the noise bylaws. So I'm not sure we need one overlaying the other. I understand where you're coming from, but one neighbour who's moved in all of a sudden takes umbrage to the noise. There goes your nightlife. There goes your vibrancy. I would suggest that heavy-handed DLC making provisions in that list will put people out of business. Security, patron to security ratio, is it 1-on-1? We employ the whole of watchdog security to oversee the same amount. I I just think this is potentially going well over the top.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, councillors? Councillor Lee.
I just appreciate hearing from Councillor Brown on that, who has some inside knowledge on all of that. And as a general principle, I'm concerned about the hoops that people will be expected to go through. And that's, yeah, a wee bit sceptical of all of that, I'd have to say.
Okay, are we, given that you mentioned that the DLC can still impose some of these things anyway, regardless of whether we have them, is there some feeling around the table that option 1 is the one to go with, which is to keep it the same? Or is there some feeling that we should be going harder with the conditions? So perhaps any other councillors? So I've had a couple of ones, so Councillor Barker.
Just a question for the councillors. Do the mandatory provisions make sense to us around the table? And is it just the other second layer underneath that are causing the concern? Do we leave in the mandatory, some way of keeping those mandatory provisions in there? But they're already there, are they?
Yes, I think that the understanding is that they remain if we went out with option 1 as the preferred option. Is that correct? That we stay the same? We keep the SIP10 principles and the host responsibility, which has those mandatory provisions.
Thank you. Just clarifying. Thank you.
Thank you. So is there any other strong feeling that we should go with option 2? Otherwise it seems that there's a consensus for option 1 on that one. Okay, thank you. We'll take that as option 1. Moving now to on-licence sensitive sites.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So our current sensitive sites, so there's no new restrictions on licensed locations in relation to sensitive sites. What we have here is option 1 to keep it the same, and option 2, which is our recommended option, is to go with option 1 plus add in a pre-application engagement for bars and taverns, which is similar to what we have with the off licenses, where there's an engagement with surrounding premise with a 200-metre radius, boundary to boundary. So our recommended option is to include a option 1 plus option 2.
So I think for the other one we went with the option 2, which was for the pre-engagement for 200 metres. Is there any reason for a differentiation between an on and off for the 200 metres? Okay. So is there, councillors, any feeling around option 1 or 2? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I'm sorry, I won't carry on because I've already restated, but youth centre, for example. So do we consider the library a youth centre? Large concentration of school kids every day? So now we're going to turn around. I know that's not specific a youth centre, but I just warn my friends here, there's some places, some of those definitions, like places of worship, I feel you may be making rods for your own back, but
I think this just gets staff to clarify. I think you said everybody within the 200, which could be some of these things as well as a whole lot of other definitions of.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, that's correct. And this is specifically for new on-licensed premises, not for renewals.
Great, but forgive me, if the library put in, if someone applied on Arawa Street for a new licence, you could have potentially the library saying, and if not, how it sort of makes a mockery of why we're saying youth centres. I just worry about some of your definitions here, I think maybe causing trouble for ourselves down the track, but I get your intent, so thank you.
Do you want to explain that a little bit more, Greg, then, if you take that example?
Thank you. I think the intention of saying including education facilities, marae, places of worship and residential areas, it's actually to encompass everybody within the 200 metres, whether that is an education facility, youth centre or a residential area. It's immaterial, it's everybody within the 200 metres.
Okay, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I kind of agree with where Councillor O'Brien's coming from. If you look at education facilities, presumably that a school would fit into that. All of Eat Street, in fact, all of Tūtanakai Street up to Arawa Street would be within 200 metres of Rotorua Primary School. So that whole area would immediately mean that they would have to consult with the school, which doesn't even open at the times of opening hours that these bars or nightclubs, whatever they are, would be in operation. There are 2 churches in that area. So you have the Destiny Church, and then there is another one just up opposite the Regent Hotel. I'm concerned that if we go down this path where it's very specific, we could be restricting future growth in those areas.
Okay, so we've had some suggestions that it should stay as option 1. Councillor Lee?
I would endorse Councillor Patterson and Councillor O'Brien's views on this one.
Okay, thank you. Any other contrary view? Otherwise, we'll take the preferred option as option 1 on that one for sensitive sites. Moving on now to club licence discretionary conditions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm aware of the time, so I'll go through these briefly. This is for club licences, the discretionary conditions currently similar to the others, where we've got subtet principles and a host responsibility policy, and additional conditions are added on a case-by-case basis by the DLC. So with regards to club licences, option 1 would be to keep it the same, and option 2 would be to adopt additional conditions, which we have the mandatory conditions of a host responsibility policy, which includes some additional to the on-licensed premise, such as a duty manager present, busy periods of 50 plus people, etc. And then consideration with the DLC based on size and risk, additional subtet principles, similar to what we had presented previously.
Given what we decided previously, councillors, is this an option, or are we going back to option 1 like we did on the previous one, because the DLC still can impose those other additional conditions? Okay, I think I'm getting option 1 on that one then for, thank you. Now, special licence discretionary conditions, very similar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yep, correct. This is, the current situation is a requirement regarding the type of food available based on the event and the duration of the event, and then there's additional conditions that can be added. So once again, having an option to keep it the same or to adopt additional conditions, and they are there on the screen for you.
So are we keeping consistency, councillors, or is there some suggestion that for special licences they need to have these additional discretionary conditions? Otherwise it seems option 1 is the preferred. Okay, option 1, thank you. And thank you. I think we've now reached the end, have we, Greg? Not quite.
Yes, we have. Thank you.
So thank you very much, councillors. We've had some really good discussion, given some good guidance to the staff today. So thank you very much. There is a lot of reading for this, and I appreciate the work that the staff have done to collate all the information from the police and the Ministry of Health. We've given, I think, plenty of guidance today, and there will be a future decision made at the council meeting on the 26th of February to adopt a final consultation document to go out to the public for consideration. Councillor O'Brien? I thought we'd pretty much covered it all, but is there something burning that
Well, I suppose at the end of the day, I mean, you asked before if we had further suggestions. Well, I just concern that we seem to be trying to manage issues which at the end of the day are out of our control. We're tinkering on the edge, and I appreciate that's what the law, we have to work within laws. We can't stop people drinking when they're drinking excessively. We can just tinker with the sales side with conditions of operations. The one that I'm really surprised that hasn't come forward is, I know that, is it Hamilton, I think, are also considering bylaws at the moment or change. And I still wonder, the main thing is about pricing. Now, for me, part of my concern about what we're doing today is that essentially we've just put the price, if some of these things go ahead, we've just put the price of an off-licence up. So suddenly my business was worth X, now if some of these go in, it's going to be X times 2, because no one else can go into competition with me. I don't know how that's going to reduce the harm caused by alcohol. It's going to make people's profits better, but I'm still not quite sure how some of these things are going to actually affect reducing the harm caused by alcohol. And secondly, I perhaps wonder why we haven't looked at doing something in the regards of trying to put the price, particularly with off licences, the price of alcohol up, like making licences more expensive. I appreciate under the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act there's rules about what we have, but surely if we're looking at bylaws, now would be a time to say, are the alcohol premises paying enough for our, there are subsidies from ratepayers going into this, or does it cover? Or two, should we be looking to try and increase the price of liquor licences to actually affect alcohol consumption, especially with off licences where we don't control? You know, do we need to have RTDs with 7% alcohol compared to 4.5 or 5? You know, I know 7% makes a big difference to those consuming them, especially if they're drinking, say, a dozen of them or something like that. So I'm really surprised that that wasn't something that we've looked at. So, yeah, I'm just a bit surprised some of the harder issues we don't seem to have put forward. So thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor O'Brien. There is an opportunity, I think, through the annual plan discussion around fees and charges, which is not for this discussion today. Remembering this is still an opportunity for us to consult with the community, and they may also have other suggestions like you have just made as well for us to look at, but we're obviously just working within the bounds of the current bylaws and policy amendments. So can I thank you all today for taking the time to consider all of this information and to the staff. And Councillor Maxwell, if you would like to close the meeting with a karakia, please.
I nui tātou kia tau anō, kia tātou katoa te ata whai o tō tātou ariki ai kraiti. Me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu ai anei a ke tonu atu. Āmene. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, Councillor Maxwell. Declare the workshop closed. Thank you, councillors.